Let me see.
I'll make you co-host just in case. Hang on. Let's see.
Oh no, it looks like it's okay.
It's okay? Okay.
Yeah, it looks like I can share. Let me just see. That works?
Yeah, it totally
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So
Are we doing?
before we get going, Tamara, let's just talk a little bit about
Yeah.
today. So,
Grab coffee. Hang on.
well, oh, yeah. I mean, well, first of all, so this is our last distance unlearning session. Last week was it last week? No, that was Thanksgiving. The week before, God, it was Thanksgiving only last week. Wow, this has been a long week.
It has been.
It has been a long week. So, we had a chance to reflect last week on the last epistemic justice session. And I don't know if, Michelle, you want to talk to Kurt and Tamrin about next semester in terms of the Pachasana workshops.
Yeah, so with Pachaisana, it's a year-long collaboration, and what they had recommended is to do the epistemic justice workshops in the fall as sort of the theoretical work, and then in the spring to focus more on praxis. So the series of workshops in the spring will be on storytelling for social change, and it'll be we're trying to figure out the structure, and maybe you guys can weigh in on this as well. Where we can structure it the way that we did this semester, with workshops kind of spaced out maybe every 3 weeks or so, I think is what we had, with the follow-up, always having a follow-up discussion during the Unlearning hour. The times might be a little bit different, just based on our schedules. And then they wanted to have like a more extended workshop at the very end to make sure that we can capture all of that work, which makes a lot of sense. Yeah. But I didn't know, Tamara, maybe from your perspective, participating in the workshops this week, we have the option to run them more like closer together, so that we have like the kind of like the experience, from the previous one fresh. We have our reflection, we have the next one, like that kind of thing. So run them a little bit closer together. Hopefully get a more consistent crowd to participate, and that way we can maintain that momentum and continuity. Or if we spread them out across the semester, like where we have a workshop every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, and have we have other artists that we're working with and bring those in, in between, as sort of an evolving discussion that draws on a lot of different perspectives potentially. So I don't know what y'all think about that. Like what might work better, because they're open to either way.
I mean, I think either way sounds great. I like the idea of bringing other, like if we have a workshop and then like a reflection, and then maybe the third week is like another artist or somebody that we work with, or maybe even use some of the things that we learned in the workshop in a session with another artist or something. I don't know. That's interesting. I like that idea.
You do? Okay. Yeah. I don't know, Richard or Kurt, what you guys feel about that.
So what I was going to say is, and Michelle, we haven't really talked about this yet, so we can talk more about this, but the Maria Teresa Alba's work, the Guarani newspaper, is now in place at the Columbus Printed Arts.
Yeah.
And actually, and Michelle, I owe you a large update on this. The two editors of the newspapers who are within that community in the Amazon have become official contributors to the project, to the reading room. They're sending texts in Guarani to the library as part of that. And so it would be interesting to make some space in our distance unlearning hour to process that. I mean, Michelle, you and I talk about formalizing the relationship between this particular project, because also Sebastian is involved with this project too. So there is definitely now two artist contributors to that project that are within the remit of our working group. Yeah. And so given that it's sitting in Columbus, and I was even contemplating, I don't know if this is possible, but having holding the, like, at least virtually, me being in the space
Wow.
during our Unlearning hour. It depends on Rebecca a little bit, because I don't want to impose a structure that doesn't work for her with our working life. But yeah, so that just adds a level of, and also there may be more updates from the Cassandra Press project too that might come in. So initially I was thinking that it worked so well this semester not to mess with it, but maybe the bunching would make some sense. It also would free us, Michelle, I was just thinking about if they want more time, and I know in Spanish and Portuguese you have the colloquium that would, so Tamarin and Kurt, we actually have to move it probably to about 1 o'clock on Fridays. And you know, it's I see you nodding, which is wonderful, because there's that moment when you're like, no.
Good, but it's funny because that's when it's like today I have back to back, like everybody puts stuff on Fridays because maybe there's not as many classes or something. I don't know, but it's fine. Yeah. Fridays are fine.
Okay. So I think the idea that Michelle and I were floating was that 1 o'clock would be our Unlearning hour. And you could use that time, but maybe we could even do it 12:30 on days where, or 12:30 on days when they need more time.
Yeah.
And then we bunch those together. So that would be my preference. But again, Kurt might want to weigh in. I don't know.
Oh no, that's probably actually better.
Bunching them. Okay.
And,
yeah. So the thing
is great.
Yeah. So the timing of different projects, you know, is kind of a little bit, we don't want to lose momentum. Like if we bunch them, then we potentially sacrifice like postponing the Columbus Arts, you know, discussion after it's already underway, you know. The other collaboration that we also have is the Red de Artistas Comunitarios Interculturales, and they're producing a lot this semester. They haven't, you know, we haven't had them in the space, but that would be another opportunity to bring them into our Unlearning hour space to kind of inform us about they have a multitude of projects, you know. So yeah, how about Richard and I can discuss a little bit? It sounds like it could go either way. And we also have to coordinate with Pachaysana to kind of get their perspective on what would work best. And yes, Richard, let's take up that discussion about formalizing the relationship with the artists that are participating with Columbus Arts for sure. So yeah, but I'm glad that the Friday afternoon worked.
I was just saying the newspaper itself is incredible. It's so it's in Guarani, Portuguese, English, and an Australian Indigenous language.
Wow.
And it's a direct report of members of that community, and it's free, but we're going to be asking for donations in the space. I was just checking if the web page had been updated. Yeah, it has. Here we go. So the updated web page, actually, I'm just going to share screen so you can see it, and I'll send the link. But so this is the project, and actually it's ongoing until at least April, and we may even extend it longer because it's such a rich project that, you know, the artists have produced these screen prints based on phrases that come. So we're actually asking the people that made the paper, who are Kei Rushu Katapuri and Virapotu Asaka, who are going to, they have a statement in the paper in Guarani that we're going to make a screen print of. And so these are the books, and here's the newspaper, and it links to Maria Teresa Alves's website. But it's really interesting because there's no way to access the newspaper virtually. So it's not been put online. Mm-hmm. And so this kind of quite moving to me, because this was produced in this institute in Brazil, and then was sent to Australia, and then it was sent to me. And so Columbus is like one of the few places in the world that has this text. And so it's quite, anyway, so I do need to kind of make a little bit more of a fanfare about it. because of this, because of how kind of singular it is. And actually, I would even say we could devote a session to reading it, and the experience of reading the newspaper as a group would be kind of important. So anyway, sorry, Michelle, for not, I have just been like, it's been a bit intense the last week or so, and I haven't, it's just been all finalized really recently.
Yeah, I'm very much in the same boat, so I have some updates for you guys as well. So yeah, good. Well, so, one way or the other, it seems like we have a pretty exciting agenda coming up for the spring. There are a couple of other potential projects that it might connect to. So, for instance,
hey, Laurie's here, just to say hi to Laurie.
Hey, Laurie. So I know that, and it's not a allocated grant yet, but I know that there was a proposal for a storytelling, global arts and discovery theme, so storytelling, art, oral histories, that type of thing. So that might be another group to sort of bring in, and they're working a lot with theater, with dance, with movement, and so I think it ties in really nicely with Pachaysana, plus the concept of like written, sort of production of texts, and the ways that by which people get their stories out. So that might be a very interesting collaboration to formally or informally get involved with and draw them to our project as well. But we'll have more on that, as these things sort of like get more concrete and we know what is going to happen next spring in terms of the grants. But I think we have a full schedule. We have a really full schedule, even with the projects that we have ongoing from the autumn that carry over. We'll be pretty busy. So I'm super excited about that ongoing discussion. I can let you know that Center for Latin America, Center for Latin American Studies approved a series of small grants for the librarians to move forward with certain cataloging of certain collections that also have some connection. Like it's not a Cachawilla Cuna project, but it ties in some ways. And I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have at least 4 undergraduate students working with me in the spring as student curators for the Andean and Amazonian Indigenous Arts collection. So that's really exciting because that definitely kind of comes into part of this group, and we were eager to involve more undergraduates in the discussion. These are pretty brilliant students, so I'm excited to have their voices sort of in this participation as well. So lots of stuff going on.
Yeah.
We just have to, fighting, just stay on top of it. So, yeah.
That's great. Michelle, I just wanted to add as well. So have you met Laurie? I was trying to work out if you'd met from previous meetings before.
I think, Laurie, we met one time before, right? At least one time.
Where was I? Have a foggy memory.
Maybe during the Pachaysana workshop last time, or either. I mean, it's got to be either.
Yeah, I don't think she was part of the Pachaysana workshop, but she was part of the reflection last time. So I don't think you were there, Michelle. But Laurie's
someone, yeah.
Okay.
Laurie's a PhD student in our department in Arts Administration, Education and Policy, and interested in sound art and unlearning. And I'm just going to, for Kurt and Laurie, if you haven't seen our note, at 1:30 today, we're having a conversation with Candice Williams and Alina Bayana about their proposed Cassandra Press Reader. I'm just posting the email I sent in here, which has well, it would have the Zoom link if it didn't just cut. Let me make sure that you get the Zoom link.
I might ask you to email that to me. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'll forward it to you. I'll forward it to you as well, Laurie. But there's the link to the Zoom meeting. So 1:30 today, and again, it's late notice because we were trying to get them to come to this session, but Candice is in the West Coast, and so it would have been her waking up at 6:30 in the morning. So we were able to do it later. But so this session, we wanted to actually, not only reflect on what we've done this semester, but also look forward to that commission. So just to give you some background, Cachawilla Cuna has commissioned a Cassandra Press Reader on the subject of erasure, which is a collaboration between Candice Williams, who runs Cassandra Press and also is an artist in her own right, who engages with questions of Black liberation and resistance in the US. And so bridging those discussions and political discussions, artistic discussions, with the work of Alina Baiana, who's an Afro-Brazilian artist who has a considerable work with indigenous populations in the Brazilian Amazon. And so this will be about indigenous erasure in the Amazon. So it's about how to bring those two discussions together. And so this reader, they're probably not, very far into the process of working on the reader, but what we'll hopefully get this afternoon is an insight into how Candace goes about these readers traditionally in Cassandra Press, but also what their collaboration is starting to look like. And so we're going to get an insight into process. And as Laurie knows and Tamrin knows, this semester, the classes that I'm teaching, the drawing class with Suzanne Silva on erasure, and then the theory seminar in art education, have assignments that are based on reading these readers and responding to these readers that have already been published by Cassandra Press. And Tamrin has generously agreed to present to our group today the work she's done for the drawing class on the reader and ethics. And so we get that presentation. Maybe that's what we should do first, if that's okay, Michelle. And then we can, if we have a bit of time after Tamrin has presented, we can come back to general reflections from the work. And so, Laurie's been, what reader were you engaging with, Laurie? I've forgotten with your sound piece. Oh, I can't hear.
Sorry, double consciousness, Dubois.
Double consciousness, yeah. So that's great. So Laurie is and Tamrin too are creating sound works that are responses to the readers that are going to be streamed on the Minus Plato radio station on Tuesday as well. So
wow, okay.
yeah. So I guess I can share that too. I'll share the little what do you call it, the little flyer for that. Yeah, so Tamrin, over to you, and thanks again for being open to share your work from, considerable work on this project.
Sure, yeah. Let me just, oops, there. Sure, so I read this Cassandra Press Reader, Ethics, Imperceptibility, Invisibility, Detectability, and Deniability for both of the classes, the studio-based class and then the theory class. And what I ended up doing was setting up a framework for myself to kind of, or like a process, a very strict process. I found my first read of the text like challenging and kind of unwieldy. And so I decided I would read the text all the way through in order 3 times. and these readers, you don't have to read the text in order, but I found that with each pass, I was like picking up more connections. And so my first pass I read in September and used black ink for any notations. I just chose one spread. I have scanned the whole reader and all of my notes.
Tamrin, could I just interrupt 1 sec? Sorry, do you mind just like stepping back a little bit and just telling us about the reader as it stands before you intervened in it and you edited
Sure.
it? Just so that then, because if we're thinking of this commission, what to expect from Cassandra Press for what is a reader for them, and then how you engage with it.
Yeah, sure. So I bought the physical reader. A lot of the students in the class were engaging with like a digital copy, so you could purchase either. But I decided since I was going to be altering a copy, I wanted to like have the physical reader. And it allowed me to take notes much differently than I have been throughout the semester with reading on PDFs. Which was pretty great. So engaging in this reader, I don't know if you can see because my screen I know is with me is small, but this is the index, which
just read them out for us, Tamrin. Sorry, just
sure, I will. Yeah. So this reader has 5 texts, Deleuze and Guattari, Immanence and Desire. Fred Moten, Blackness and Governance from the Undercommons. And Rosie Braidotti, Ethics of Becoming Imperceptible, which was the largest text and also for me kind of the most challenging one to decipher. But I found connections with the other 4 texts in this reader for sure. Nathan Lee's Becoming Undetectable, which talked about the HIV/AIDS crisis and development and kind of where things are today, and Denise Ferreira da Silva's Matter Beyond the Equation of Value, which talked about the Black Lives Matter movement and kind of she talked through like a thought experiment and this equation of Black Lives Matter, essentially, equation of value, which also was a little bit challenging for me to understand. You know, it took lots of, I still haven't quite absorbed. I mean, I felt like these passes were helping me absorb through making connections. And you'll see in my last slide kind of what I ended up kind of distilling out of the texts. So here you're looking at one spread. Again, I used black ink in September. October, I read it again and used red ink and, you know, made more connections. And then as I was doing this, my blue, like November pass, in this spread, at least, you can see there's lots of lines and arrows and making connections across pages, but I could only essentially in my mind make other connections beyond the like facing pages. And so what I ended up deciding to do was deconstruct the text into its individual pages and scan it. This is the map that I use to reconstruct it into one large, basically a quilt. I used a sewing machine to sew the pages together. And so this was the way that I designed it with the Braidotti in the center, because I really did feel like that was the text that it was centered in the reader. And also I felt like it was the text that I could kind of draw the most connections from the other text on the outside. And then I also engaged with a listening of a Charles Curtis piece called Our Museum. And that played a part in this project. It was part of the requirements for the assignment, but that also played a part in this project too. And I included my listening notes from 2 different sessions also in this reconstruction. So this is the piece, which ended up being about 7 foot by 7.5 feet in size. Here's like one. So once I sewed this all together, I then started using a charcoal implement to like draw connections between the pages across the span of the reader. And I thought it was pretty interesting to be able to see everything all at the same time. You know, it's not often how we see a text. We usually, you know, you see 2 pages. I also wanted to kind of mute the, let me see if you can see it. Not in this one, but this idea of muting or erasure or, you know, and kind of emergence or voice sound, you know, started cropping up throughout the piece as well for me. And so I ended up working to, and here you can see my notes from the sound piece across 2 different listening sessions. So I decided to kind of mute the images in the text. And I pulled from the listening a line that I had also kind of worked with in another project earlier in the semester by Lamonte Young, this composition, Draw a Straight Line and Follow It. And this idea of a single action in one direction and kind of note as line and making connections across this whole span of the text was like a very physical, and I'm going to go back real quick to this. You know, I would make a line all the way across. I'd stick my finger on a word and then like looking for connections and then make like this really gestural mark all the way across the page. So this kind of mapping And it seems a little kind of schizophrenic or chaotic, but you know, it was just a way for me to kind of make sense of what I had here. And then here is an image of like the new text, and it's also newly ordered because I took that Lamonti Young idea of drawing a straight line with scissors and I cut the piece, and here's my map again, on that kind of blue-purple line. I basically cut the entire text back into a book by accordion folding it, following one straight line through the final sheet. And so that also reordered the text. So you can see I started where the cover is on column 1, row 3, and I ended on the one of the Braidati pages on column 4, row 4. So it's also reordered the text. Yeah, and so here are a few images of the final piece. I used a red thread, which was a choice to kind of aesthetically matching one of the red lines I was using for annotating, but also it's a material I've used before, a red stitched line in my work. Also, I included those dotted lines come from another project I made earlier in the semester on monuments. And here you can see I'm kind of muting some of the text with tracing paper. Some of the images also with a layer of tracing paper, some chalk, sometimes charcoal, so that the words kind of crop up to the surface a little bit more, because I felt like they were competing with the texts, and filled the negative spaces with those dotted sheets of tracing paper. And then this is kind of my distilled text. So I went back through the new book in its new order, and I pulled out from each page the kind of highlighted charcoal words. And essentially, I guess then this is my summary, in a sense, of the new text, in a way that I've been taking notes for listening throughout the semester. This was kind of the same process, I guess, so to speak, for the reading. And I just, the white on this, the white text was essentially the culmination, like that was the end of the new text. Yeah, so that was my way, I guess, of distilling or summarizing or kind of pulling out the things that really stood out across the 5 different pieces. Yeah. Oh, and one more thing I just wanted to add, like for my listening project I'm working on, which isn't finished yet, I recorded the sound as a backtrack for part of it, of my like reading, essentially that idea of like reading the new text, because I like the sound of the pages. It's much more physical of an object than like this original bound. It's less contained, you know, and it also is this one straight line if I pull it all the way out. So.
Thank you, Tamron. Yeah, so there's lots to talk about here. I just want to just frame one thing, which I think is kind of significant in how we pivot in terms of maybe having the conversation later today with Candace. And that is, so as I mentioned to Tamron and to the class, the impetus for, it wasn't just this commission that was the impetus to have students engage with the Cassandra Press readers, but there was a podcast, a conversation that Candace Williams had, it must have been over the summer, where she spoke of, and this was obviously during the protests for Black Lives after the killings of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, among others. And Candace was kind of lamenting a little bit that people bought the readers but didn't read them. And I I felt kind of seen at that moment because I'd been one of those people. And so I wanted to kind of, even if this project, you know, is kind of almost like it's not a delegation of reading, you know, it's as much as my, you know, I did proceed to read some of the readers that I had, but I also wanted to disseminate the act of reading as well. So that's some of the impetus for this. But I guess, you know, one thing I should just, and this isn't, you know, I want us to discuss what Tamara presented, but I just wanted to say one thing. It's not like, I don't know what Candace's position will be on the question of altering the readers and the question of intervening in the readers. And I think it's very important that we go into this, especially in terms of positionalities of whiteness, that are acts of engagement, are acts of questions of amplification, questions of engagement, and not of undoing work that has been done. And that was kind of part of the prompt for the students, that, you know, in the erasure class, to think, how can altering not mean erasing at the same time? So, you know, Tamara, just, you know, I think that yours is a prime example of how, just by the act of annotation, and deep annotation and connection, you are processing that, even if, and I think that it's important to, you know, the whole process is important in your work, not just the final product of the, because I think if you just saw the final product, I don't know, you know, because of the paper being put across it, the tracing paper, these kinds of issues, that question of what, you know, unreadability and erasure, it does come to the fore a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I also, part of what, because you don't see all the scanned document here, like there's sections where I there's sections where I like read other texts and like had to take other notes about text, outside text, right? So like getting the undercommons and those kind of things to kind of get additional background to actually engage with what I was reading. It required other, like, lots of research, lots of outside kind of looking and research, a lot of words that I didn't know. You know, I had a lot of defining and like understand, like I still am not, I couldn't like articulately, I don't feel even like talk about the reader still, you know. It's just like not a way that I've ever engaged with reading before either. So that was an interesting process. Lori, did you want to? Yeah.
I'm just enjoying hearing you two talking about this so much. I'm almost hesitant to jump in, and both of you have already touched on some of the questions that I had while I was looking at the preview of your work, which I know is really different from seeing it in person, I'm sure, and also from like what your experience was as a process and that very dedicated process of. But what's coming through to me just from my, you know, through this window is that there's a kind of commitment to this sort of laboring of the text through kind of physical and even crafting sort of gestures that have a history and weight to them as well. And then I did have questions about legibility as well, in terms of, I don't know, the sort of like the privilege of that space of making, but also of this kind of space that we're all sharing in being able to read texts like this and think about them, you know, and that kind of positionality, how that relates to, you know, the I don't know, sort of the archiving sort of intentions of that, you know, of that text. It's, you know, that it's sort of coming out of. So, and you mentioned monuments, you know, this sort of project that you're working on, and bringing the idea of monuments into that was really interesting to me, because I thought, well, I mean, you know, in some ways, even though we're losing legibility and, you know, through this laboring sort of privileged process, was there like a sense of sort of creating a kind of monument, you know, sort of memory or monumentalizing, you know, these texts as well for you? Or could you speak maybe to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I have I've created book, like I'm I'm very interested in like the book and book, like making books. I have an archive of that was a project that I created, that this kind of unwieldy, I like the idea of like being able to physically represent like the idea of unwieldy, or like something you can't like fully, the idea that you only see two facing pages at once, as opposed to like being able to see all the pages, or being able to like this thing, like this is a thing, a book is a thing, but like to me, this is even more of a thing, because it's not only does it have me in it and my like how I engage with the text as a part of it, but it's physically something more, like, I don't know, it's physically something more, like I like that idea of making it go beyond like it's like what it is, as someone engages and like sees what can happen with it, and that might be acts as well, beyond like just the reading and the making of this, but a way of thinking beyond what I like, I guess, absorbed with the text. Yeah.
Well, I'll chime in. What an extraordinary project. Really, Tamron, you really have outdone yourself, and I just see so many different connections, like as I think through what you were talking about. So one, just sort of the challenge of how we read, right? So the fact that you read so closely really interrupts any kind of sense of appropriation or anything else. I mean, it's a really deep reading with multiple passes, and then taking that reading as evocative, like, so just thinking about, like the other readings that you brought in, from different authors to create a context of understanding, and having that piece be evocative of that broader context, I think is amazing. It really interrupts the way that we read. I love the fact that you bought the reader. This online reading thing drives me nuts. I'm kind of a paper person, but the way that students take notes, on screen versus on paper is really different. And I think that does affect the way that we remember, the way that we understand the insights and connections that we make. Absolutely, right? Interrupting that linear, sort of like reading at the 2-page is absolutely essential and so in line with our conversations about decolonial methods, right? But the thing that strikes me is that we have approached text, language, reading as predominantly symbolic, right? So uh, here it is, here's what we understand, here's the class, like draw out the big ideas and things like that. And what your project for me like conveys is the real semiotic act, right? That brings in personal experience, personal creativity, like all of those things that transform. I mean, it's there, but we tend to lean toward the symbolic interpretations and not enough towards semiotic type of analysis and production, right? Which gives that freedom of the reader to really interpret in their own sort of perspective, and only by way of that personal connection do we truly even we begin to start understanding, right? So I just thought it was extraordinary. It brought up the physicality, of it, like brings in a lot of the embodiment work that we've been thinking about and practicing this semester. When you mentioned this quote, about the lines, follow the line, note as line. For me, it resonates with a lot of the work that we've been doing in the NDN art and culture class. But what we see is reiterating patterns and people referring to lines, for example, in Shipibo pottery or embroidery, as pathways of knowledge, pathways of memory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that concept of the line and the tracing of the line sort of emerges as really, really significant. And then the two other things that I'll kind of address. One is that we have been thinking about and looking at ways that we've experienced this in some contexts with other projects of innovative documentation, right, of projects. So how do we capture events, or projects that we do, And in the past, what we've done is work with like concept visualization with the design department. My first contact with that was amazing. Like I was just completely blown away with the way that they sort of captured concepts by way of design. It was really, really inspiring. And I think that what you've done could potentially be a model that we could pilot, like we could try out in terms of documenting one of our projects, bringing in participation with the broad gestures and connections, and then deconstructing that again into a different type of order and organization. I love it. I love the sound, the rustling pages. That really captured me. So mainly that idea of like the act of reading, and all of the embodiment that it entails. And maybe that brings me to my last comment, which is sort of maybe uh, a reference to the comment that Lori made about monument and monumentalizing, right? And I would say that, and I'm just speaking from like the perspective that I know from sort of indigenous people saying things about monuments, and really the emphasis is not on monument as memory, but on practice, right? Ongoing practice as memory, So I have a chapter in my book that talks about the practices in the cemetery, and all the cemeteries are segregated in Ecuador. So they'll have like the white mestizo side of the cemetery and the indigenous side of the cemetery. And there's a real contrast, both in terms of how people use the space and just the presence of the space. So on the white mestizo side, what you'll see is the concrete, sort of like slabs with the names etched, in stone, crosses, but like permanent markers, and very few people visiting, right? So they've done their act of commemorating the death by putting the permanent marker, but they do not go often, right? And on the indigenous side, you have these little crosses. They're just made with wood, People do not put the dates on them because they fear that if it's too old of a date, somebody will take over their plots. So they guard their plots the way that they guard their land, titles. The tradition is that you bury people on top of each other. So you have like one plot and then you mix the bones and then you bury somebody else, and so it's like a family plot going down. But they'll put the names, but not the dates. And obviously, since they're just written in marker, and they're just white crosses like made out of wood, they deteriorate quickly. So you have to go, renew the marker. And people go not during difuntos, like like we often think of like the Day of the Dead, as like November 2nd, and that's the day, right? In Ecuador, there are 4 main dates during the year, and on top of that, there are 2 days during the week. And that cemetery is constantly buzzing with activity and people tending the graves and putting the dirt and things like that. So the emphasis there, and this is like drawing on Pierre Nora's idea of lieu de mémoire versus milieu de mémoire, sites versus context of memory, where clearly we have an emphasis on practice, So maybe just to sort of contextualize, or like I said, just to address the comment that Lori made about monumentalizing, that maybe somebody will deconstruct your reader,
That would be amazing.
another pass at it, and like that would be amazing, right?
Yeah.
But what an inspiring work! I'm just so amazed, by all the work that you've done and the richness of what you've produced here. The muted text brought up ideas about, so certain things that people, either from certain groups of readers or audiences, should not read. So maybe like not just erasure, but also like a veiling or a hidden thing. In Andean art, there's a concept of uku, right? Uku means inside or hidden. And often there's a tremendous amount of work that never comes to light, right? Like it's always inside the piece or in between the textiles with
Mm.
a lot of man hours, sort of like what you've done, like a lot of labor that's put in, but that is never seen, right? So something about that idea of like the value of the work that you put into it, you know, without necessarily focusing on the product, you know, as like showing it off, you know. I don't know. It's just keeps me going. So I'll just stop there, and then if something else comes up, I'll throw it in later. But just to give other people a chance to weigh in, I saw that Kurt had a comment in the chat, but um, I'll stop talking so that he can kind of weigh in here too.
Thanks. Well, that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm just. I don't know where to begin. maybe I'll write you something.
Okay, that'd be
really
great.
Impressive.
I really appreciate that. I appreciate the feedback. I'm, you know, in our class, we don't have a lot of time for like a large critique kind of conversation, and this has been so like amazing, like useful to me to think about, like especially like Michelle, what you said about this idea of innovative documentation. I've always been interested. I do performative work too, and I've always been interested in how we document live performance and re-exhibit, re-experience. I'm really interested in those ideas, so that you picked up on some of that in my work. That's great. That's great. Yeah. This piece is very much me. I never expected it to be, you know, I expected this process, but I never expected this to be so much like, it's very reflective of my work as an artist. And I didn't necessarily expect that to come out of this project. So I appreciate everything that everyone has said and the feedback, and given me a lot to think about moving forward too with my practice. So I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, I love the way that the project. Oh, go ahead, Kurt.
Can you talk, and maybe you too, Lori? I'm a musician, so whenever I hear the word sound, I get kind of like. So, can you talk a little more about and I noticed Lamonte Young you mentioned is in that reader, so now I'm curious about the reader itself. And
oh no, that was in the Charles Curtis listening that I did. Yeah.
So can either of you talk about how you're using sound, or the idea of sound in your work?
Well, it would be great if you could have time on Tuesday to listen to, like, Lori and I will both be sharing our sound projects on Tuesday.
Okay.
About 15-20 minutes approximately, and there'll be 7 of them from our class on Tuesday. We've just been using listening as a practice throughout the course, and we'll be creating we're working on these sound pieces that focus on an artist who is a participant in Documenta 14, and also integrating aspects of our Cassandra Press Readers, aspects of the listenings we've been doing, as well as content from the theory course we've been taking throughout the semester.
They're not asking a lot really at all of the students.
Yeah, and Lori's project is, I got a preview of it earlier in the week, and it's incredible. It's got a visual component to it as well, but yeah, it'll be an exciting day. So I would encourage, if you can, to listen on Tuesday.
I'll plan on it. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I don't know if Lori wants to say a little bit about, just very briefly about yours, because there is a question of Indigenous space and sound in relation to it, because her work is based on Post-Commodity, who are a mestizo and Indigenous collective based in the American Southwest. So I don't know if you wanted to say just a couple of words, Lori. Sorry to make you distill it.
No, I'm not going to try to distill it. It's okay. But I think that the sounds that Post-Commodity, you know, they create these really interesting sound interventions that are very much tied to place and border communities and migration. So the piece that I'm focusing on is about like sort of long, sort of migratory walking experiences, and that are recorded through voices of just a very broad range of artists, musicians, performers, poets, over these speakers that are usually used as sonic weapons, in the site of Aristotle's Lyceum. So it's very layered. So what I did was I felt very compelled to visit those places. I sure wish I could visit Aristotle's Lyceum. So I went on Google Earth instead and attempted to sort of virtually walk in that space, like slow walk in that space. And then I ended up walking in some of the sites of their other works too. Repellent Fence, I walked the 1 mile. I didn't for the whole sound piece, but if you tune in by Zoom, you can actually see the visual like walking tour by satellite that I conducted as a part of the listening. And I feel like it did for me kind of connect me to that sound and that kind of layering of place, you know, that is inherent to the sound pieces. It's almost like being in the site sort of brought the sound, you know, like there's this question of like, where is the work, you know, with sound art that I'm really interested in. And, you know, sometimes being in a place kind of summons a kind of listening experience that then can lead to a process of maybe creating a sound artwork. So I was really more interested in the process, and I felt like it was kind of, yeah, it was kind of interesting in that way. So if you want to zoom in to see the visual piece along with the audio, that would be great. I tried to make it so that the audio piece gives something different than if you were to watch, you know, and that there was a kind of integrity to both the visual and the oral in the piece as much as possible as well. So that's all.
Laurie, I have to share with you, and you know, this is the beginning of something longer, but Kayla Gifford, one of the students in the drawing class, also worked with post-commodity, but she has a practice that engages with her partner who is from Iraq, from Mosul, and about his family and their migration. And let me just, she puts everything up on her website, and this is her website here. And I'll send you the link, but here, she created a 5th act to the post-commodity work. And it's kind of amazing because it doesn't use any of the sound from the post-commodity piece, but it is, she did the Cassandra Press on the White Savior. But so she's like refiguring herself in relation to the White Savior, but she has sound of, I don't know, Tamron, if you've listened to it yet, but the sound of her husband, who was a sheep smuggler, moving the sheep through the country, as well as talking to a nephew about his migration from from Iraq to Turkey. And so there's just this, in the spirit of the post-commodity, anyway, it's a very, you know, as you say, you know, layered work for Kayla. And, you know, I think the potential for dialogue between the two of you would be really exciting, just thinking about, Cameron knows Kayla's work from the class and knows.
Yeah, she's incredible. She's an amazing artist. Yeah.
Great project. Yeah, that sounds really, really cool.
Just send the link in the chat.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't leave much time to reflect on our semester, but I don't know.
Kind of an ongoing thing, and I know that for all of us, probably, you know, like those experiences of the workshops have kind of lingered through our week, you know, and made their way into our classes somehow or into our lives. I can tell you that, for instance, for Thanksgiving, you know, and I sent this out to the Cachawillacuna group, but for Thanksgiving, we did the land acknowledgement with the kids, you know, and with the children, it's really, they're so much more engaged and uninhibited to try embodiment things. So they were behaving like trees, with feeling the breeze and listening to the birds. And then they picked up the dirt and kind of rubbed it and smelled it. And then, like, you know, as I was talking through Kuken no Kwisi's statement, you know, So, you know, in different ways, different audiences, we tend to like bring those things in of embodiment, of decoloniality, you know, methods, practices, things like that, you know. So it was meaningful. We're working with Avkuken to kind of modify his statement and create like a separate call out box in Kachawidaikuna. We don't have a land statement there right now, which is like problematic, right? And our website is sort of in development. But we're going to create a whole call out box, you know, that includes the statement. It includes Avkuken's mural, and also that segment of the webinar where we did the embodied land acknowledgement. I think there were 2 times that we did things like that. So to include those in there as well, you know, and of course to open it up and welcome other types of things that we can put as an entire robust section as opposed to just a statement. You know what I mean? Yeah. Maybe I'll just say like one other thing for Tamron. Tamron, I wanted to say I loved how your project was emergent, you know, and kind of it took on a life of its own. So I think that that's terrific, you know, like when the art kind of takes you in a direction that you didn't expect to go and breaks the script entirely, you know. So I thought that was, I just wanted to say that was really lovely.
Thanks. Yeah, I usually have strict guidelines and plans for myself, and then when things go out of that, I'm really excited because it's hard for me to do that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, here we are at the hour, and again, you know, just 1 hour of unlearning per week. So, you know, thank you, everyone. It's been, you know, it's been a really, I do feel like I need to take some time over the break to not just move straight into something else and onto, you know, all the things that we have, because this has been a very rich semester, and one that I, you know, it's also been a semester of thinking about, you know, anyway, I went to bed last night just reflecting on the fact that 3,000 people in this country had died that day. And like that just kind of destroyed me, like in just thinking about it. I had a very kind of emotional day with my family back in the UK, and I'd just been, and it just kind of dawned on me that I'm just trying to do all this stuff, and like while this is happening, and I feel like we're going to look back at this moment and wonder how, like even these videos or even this, you know, these sessions, and like how did we do that while that was going on in our lives, and not going on like, it sounds like I'm talking about it's over there, but it's not. It's like it's on top of us, and it's with us. And anyway, it's really hard, and there's that weird guilt that comes from doing something else and not staying with that mourning and that grief that you know, it just appears some places in our days. And so, yeah, it's just, you know, so I have a lot of gratitude for the space we've shared this semester, but also a feeling of so much to do in working out how to maybe even be more responsive to the conditions in which we're working, and unlearning this feeling of just continuing. There goes being my email, you know. It's like that. So anyway.
But I would say, Richard, that for me, like this has been a space of healing, you know.
Yeah.
So it is very much connected, but this hour is kind of what sustains me over the course of the week, you know. And I think that in that sense, we do carry forward some sort of participation that is hopeful. It is purposeful, you know.
Yeah.
That we sort of all get through all of this, you know. So. Yeah. But thank you, Richard. This has been an amazing forum for 2 semesters going on now, and just thank you. This is really terrific. So we look forward to more of it in the spring.
Well, without all of you, it would just be me sitting here looking at Zoom. So I'm very grateful to you know, I always wonder if one day that will happen, you know.
I had a class session, and I had to tell my students, but I had a class session where everybody had their screens off, and I said, "This is not going to work, guys."
It's funny you say that, Michelle, because you know, I'm very responsive. When all the students are on mute, I feel very nervous. And it's not just the screen, but the mute, you know, the non-sound, you know, and I feel like, anyway, it really disturbs me not having the sound that comes through, not just the visual.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
congratulations to you. Congratulations, Tamara and Lori, and all the students in the class. It just seems like you've done extraordinary, meaningful work connected to so many themes that we've talked about this semester. So we look forward. Please do send that announcement to the whole Kachawidekuna group, because I think many people will be interested. So, yeah.
And also I want to remind ourselves about what Kurt shared with us a few weeks ago. I think that was, you know, has been part of our processing too, the fact, Kurt, that you shared that your experiences. And I don't know, anyway, I would add that to the work that Tamara and Laurie have been doing.
Yeah.
Very much.
Okay, everyone. Yep. See you, some of you on Tuesday. See some, no, 1:30 today if you can make it. The link is in the, I put it in the chat, but also in the Kachawilakuna list as well, which Laurie, you need to get on. Okay. Bye, everyone. The Kachawilakuna mailing list.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yes, I should be a part of that
You go
by
to the
now.
website and then you sign up, okay?
I did sign up, but I haven't seen anything yet. I'll recheck it.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's good.
Okay.
Okay. Bye,
Nice
everyone.
to see you all.
Bye.
Stay safe.